say maybe this is a personal failing of mine, Nathan. I think I might have Buckeye Talk. I think I have less of a handle on Tim Walton as a coach than I have had on an Ohio State assistant for a while. He seems like a little bit of a low-key dude. He played at Ohio State. He's been in the NFL basically his whole career, and he came in at a really important position for Ohio State as corners coach. But it took Kerry Combs 15 minutes of being in the building for people to have a handle on Kerry Combs. I'm not saying that's better or worse than Tim Walton, but Nathan, when Tim Walton sits down and talks for 20 minutes about the state of Ohio State cornerbacks, like that's kind of valuable because I still don't feel like I've wrapped my hands exactly around what he's like as a coach, what his strategies are, how he builds relationships, you know, and this is a guy who's had a great career in football. So what's our vibe from this interview session with Tim Walton?
And it's, you know, guys like everybody's got a different philosophy, right? Everybody's got a different personality, a different way of going about things. Kerry Combs, personality-wise, is not the same as Larry Johnson, but, you know, you had a handle on Larry Johnson pretty quickly too, not only because of what he did at Penn State, but because of what his group very quickly started to do at Ohio State. And for Tim Walton, you know, he did come in at a time, a crucial time for a position group, and then the people who were maybe we thought were the most secure in that position group struggled. Whether that was Denzel-Burke early in the year, whether it was Cam Brown through the injuries and things that he had, whether it was Jordan-Hancock not being able to play at all. So just a very kind of topsy-turvy year for him, and I don't know how fair it is to put a lot of that on him. It's probably also fair to put some of it on the guy who's running the room. So I think you're looking for two things in year two. Number one, those fundamental issues, and as much as injuries played into them, they were kind of rampant at the top of that depth chart. Those things have to be corrected in year two. I don't think we can be talking about cornerback being a problem of just like fundamental play in the second year, the way that we were in that first year. And number two is what impact does he start to make in recruiting? And, you know, they brought in two promising guys at cornerback that people seem very enthused about. One who's here already in Jermaine Matthews, one in Calvin Simpson-Hunt who gets here in the summer. But the upside is clearly there for those guys. I know, Doug, you were asking him about freshman corners, and we can talk about that more later. But to me, there's sort of a dual thing that he's going to be judged on in the short term. It's do you correct those mistakes from last year, but are you also developing the bottom of this room to get back up to what the Ohio State standard has been at cornerback now for the past 2 decades?
I don't want to be on unfair alert, Stephen, but I'm on moderate alert for a guy who was in the NFL, I think, the previous 13 years. Now, also in the mid-2000s, early, I mean, this guy was the defensive coordinator at Miami. You know, like this is a big time dude. And again, you go to the NFL, you earn your place in the NFL. So I'm not going to drop the BD word here. I'm not going to do that because I don't think that's fair. But I always have, you guys know what it is, right? The BD word. It's not like a naughty. It's not like the naughty BD word. Like
BD's Mongolian barbecue?
I love Mongolian barbecue, but not too Mongolian. Just like anything. I like that kind of food, but I just want it Disneyfied. But who loves you? You love the Mongolian barbecue, Nathan, right?
100%.
Steven, where are you on Mongolian barbecue?
I love Mongolian barbecue.
Oh my
it's just
God,
you going,
let's go.
It was you. No, it's like we Nathan and I are saying we love Mongolian barbecue. You're saying you like barbecue, just not too much Mongolian. So you just like barbecue.
But Mongolian barbecue is just stir fry.
No. I want to stir. But the thing I like about Mongolian barbecue is that you're in control because you put in the veggies you want, you pick the sauce you want, and again, there's some things that I don't want in my food. To be in control like that, and I like watching people cook my food.
Yeah, it's very much for the picky eater. It's one of those restaurants for the picky eaters.
I love it. Do you guys bang the gong? Do you hit the gong when you're there?
I usually leave the gong alone. But it's the kind of place where you'll see a guy just walk up with like an overflowing bowl of just steak and chicken and throw it up there. Like, that's what I'm eating today. No veggies.
Yeah. I think that's a reasonable interview question. There's a lot of things that, you know, when I've thought about sort of creating like a baseline, like 20-question interview, and then we try to have former players or people on, like you just ask everybody the same questions all the time. And what is your bowl of choice at Mongolian barbecue? I think is very indicative of what kind of person you are. What kind of sauce do you put on it? How many veggies do you put in? Do you want it overflowing? Do you mix your meats? Do you cross the streams of the meat, or do you go one meat at a time? So, I do hit the gong. I love hitting the gong. Who doesn't love hitting the gong? You got to pay $1. You got to give them a tip. You can't just hit the gong. But my kids, it was always hitting the gong was as exciting as getting the food. So BDs, if we found out after the fact, it was like, oh, what does that stand for? If you went up and you're like, hey, what does the BDs stand for in BD's Mongolian barbecue? And they were like, Bill Davis. You'd be like, oh my God. What?
Founding this restaurant was what he did while he was supposed to be coaching Ohio State's defensive backs or linebackers. I mean,
at least he did something successful.
Hey, where's Coach? Where's Coach? And like he's like refilling the green peppers. It's like, oh guys, I'm sorry. I don't know. Do some push-ups.
He's concocting some more sauce formulas to put on the wall.
His expense report is just Mongolian barbecue for recruits. Well, he's not sitting down eating with them. They're just making their own food. He's in the back taking care of business.
No, right. And it's not, He gives the recruits 20% off, but they still got to pay a little bit. Come on, Bill's trying to make a living here. Bill Davis's Mongolian barbecue.
It's that easy to just take one of these episodes completely off the rails. That's like 5 minutes we're never going to get back.
I love it. God, people, if you haven't been to a Mongolian barbecue, you got to go. So in the end, I'm not going to do that to Tim Walton. But Stephen, I'm curious sometimes because coaching NFL players and coaching college players is a very different thing. And it relates to recruiting and the relationships you build with 18 and 17-year-olds then. And it relates to the development when you get here of how you build up 19 and 20-year-olds and get the best out of them. And I think Bill Davis never got it. And I think Bill Davis knew that. He went back to the NFL. And so I'm not saying Tim Walton can't do it because he did it before. It's how he got to the NFL. But he hasn't done it in a long time. And he gets some credit for a couple of the guys they brought in this class. They also lost a guy to a flip. And as Nathan said, we talked about cornerback problems a lot this season, but we didn't talk about Tim Walton a lot, but ultimately you're in charge of your room. So where should fans be with the Tim Walton view right now?
So I think there's a couple of ways that you can talk about assistant coaches and whether or not they're good at their jobs. I think he's a very good evaluator of talent. And Jermaine Matthews and Calvin Simpson-Hunt are proof of that. And I think that's a decade being in the NFL where all you're doing is looking at film, so you know what you're looking at. Jermaine Matthews was not a top 50 recruit when he got offered by Ohio State. He was a mid-level 3-star recruit that Tim Walton challenged to say, hey, come prove that you are an Ohio State football player. And then he came and did it. He offered him. He committed 30 days later, as I've written about and texted about, and is kind of known at this point. And 6 months later, Jermaine Matthews is one of the 50 best players in the country. That's good evaluating to me. Calvin Simpson-Hunt was top 175, something like that. It was interesting, but they flipped him from Texas Tech. It's not like they flipped him from Florida or USC or Alabama or something. So it's a quality pickup, but I don't think anybody was jumping over the moon about it. Then you click on the tape and go, oh, that's a dude. He might come in here and make some noise in here. And he's a track guy. He's got 10-6 speed. So that's a guy to keep an eye on there. And now he's a top 80 recruit. So it's like, okay, from an evaluation standpoint, he checks off that box. Every other box, it's very hard right now to decide if he's good or not because that caveat of so many guys were hurt that you don't really know how much development was there because guys were in and out the lineup. I mean, denzel-burke's having surgery in the middle of the week while they're practicing and then deciding whether or not he's going to play on that Saturday. So it is kind of a hold off with the development standpoint. But I think from an evaluator standpoint, he's really good. I think he's a decent recruiter. Can you repeat that performance that you had in 2023 with this 2024 class, now that you are starting from scratch and not trying to play catch up with guys? Can you go get the 5-star? We'll see with that. But with the development, this is, I think, the most crucial spring and fall that Tim Walton's going to have here because denzel-burke's going to be healthier. Jordan-Hancock's going to be healthier. Jair Brown got a chance to do some things. And then you just brought in a guy, Davison Ogbison. I'm saying it correctly.
It's going to take a while.
Igbo Nissen from Ole Miss. I'm very cognizant of that now. You brought him in as a guy who played a lot as a freshman. You've got talent. Can you go develop it, and can we see a better production on field on Saturday when we get to the fall? Because you've got options. I don't think he had a lot of options last year. It was either play a guy who's maybe 50% healthy or a guy who had never done the job before, and he's got a little bit more than that this year.
And Ryan Day, I think, did give Tim Walton credit for going and getting Calvin Simpson-Hunt out of Texas. A lot of times we're always asking about that with the new assistant. Hey, did you go grab a guy who wasn't going to be an Ohio State guy no matter what? And I don't think Justin Fry has grabbed a guy yet like Calvin Simpson-Hunt to say hey, why is this guy here? It's you identified him and you went and got him. And so that's a plus for Tim Walton. So I do think he has some things where you can say, okay. Do we get a vibe, Nathan, of what Tim Walton thought of the season for the corners? Did he? And it's difficult because everybody is individual, but then you do end up judging a group collectively. What was his opinion on how that went?
Well, I think the opinion came up more in the way he was talking about a lot of things. It wasn't necessarily an encompassing opinion on that season, but number one, the idea that they have to have a bunch of guys ready because of what they went through last year, that depth cost them. Although we've also talked about how, again, it wasn't like the guys that they put in behind the known starters who were sometimes having the problem. Sometimes it was the known starters who had their own injury issues that affected that. But number two is just the greater idea. I mean, he was there for 20 some minutes, and the number of times the idea of competition came up, or competitiveness, or increasing the competition in that room, raising the level of competition in that room. It came up, I think, most directly in terms of, there was a moment where somebody started to ask a question about Denzel-Burke and referred to him as a locked-in starter, and he's like, well, hold on. He's a returning starter, but nobody's locked in. Everybody's got to, this into August, September, got to compete to be a starter on this team. And I think that's the right attitude to have, that the level of performance for everybody, again, factoring in the injury that he had, it was not there that you can just give. Nobody should assume anything at this point, whether that's Davis and Igbenegson coming in as a starter from the SEC, whether that's Denzel-Burke, who's been a 2-year starter here. I think there's a new battle between whatever 7 scholarship guys are going to end up being here, 6 or 7, and that's how you determine your starter. I think that's what I don't know, that's something they've learned from this past year, but something that became very starkly apparent this past year was that it was both, they are short on numbers, but the numbers are what they are. The guys aren't just falling out of trees who are NFL or Ohio State caliber cornerbacks. So they got one. They were fortunate to find one in Igbenegson, but now it's a matter of ratcheting up the competition in that room and raising the level of play in that room, because that's what's been lagging there, and it's been lagging since 2019.
You said when we were planning this podcast, Nathan, that Jim Knowles talked about some secondary stuff. Was that mostly safety stuff because it's a safety-driven defense, or did Jim Knowles have opinions about the corners that factored in?
From my recollection, it was mostly safety stuff. Looking back through, it was very much largely safety stuff. I mean, with safety, there's a lot of questions about who's going to fit where, and you've got more maybe brand new bodies. Where at corner, it's more just about. Now, I think the one place where he was talking about corner was something we talked about yesterday, was just his general concept with the defense of that emphasis on technique and that emphasis on raising the baseline of performance. And I think that applies to cornerback probably more than it applies to any other position.
Walton kind of went down that road as well. He talked a lot about just the ability to turn and look for the ball and make a play for the ball, and how much of that is technique versus how much of that is just being able to naturally do it. There is a natural feel in that type of stuff. And when he did get asked about Jermaine Matthews, that's where he went with it. He just has a natural ability to do that. So it didn't feel like guys had a natural ability to do that a lot last year. Maybe Jordan-Hancock had it, but we never got a chance to see it because he was never healthy. So in the name of competition, when you're having a defense like this that's putting corners on islands time and time again, where you probably do value guys who can make a play on the ball more than anything else, when you now have competition, can those guys rise to the cream? Can the cream rise to the top in a way maybe it didn't get to happen last year once the injuries fell apart? And it's well, who else are you going to play? Everybody else is, in the tent or dealing with injury stuff, and they're not healthy.
So does it feel like spring football at corner is going to be throw everybody out there and see what happens? Because as you said, so, Nathan, there are 2 veteran guys who have played a lot. There's some young guys on the team who haven't played all that much. And then there's 2 dudes coming in as true freshmen who, I don't know, it's hard to expect, but denzel-burke popped in spring football as a true freshman and wound up starting in game 1. So if there's an opportunity and it feels like there's just, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves with Matthews and Simpson Hunt, but it feels like there's some athletic profile. It feels like there's some dog in those guys, maybe just like there was in denzel-burke, that like denzel-burke showed up and was like, okay, like I'm ready to go right now. Is it just going to be Tim Walton? If he's saying like even the most veteran guy doesn't have anything locked up, roll them out, let them go, and let's see what we got, that really maybe more than any other position, spring football is sort of square one at corner?
Yeah, other than maybe some of those positions on the offensive line, yeah, I think that probably applies to cornerback. I think the most important thing we heard about cornerback last week was when Ryan Day read off the list of players who were unavailable for the spring. He didn't name any cornerbacks. Now, we don't know if there's a guy like denzel-burke with the stuff that he had lingering, whether that's going to affect anything. But I also think that Burke's I thought Burke was playing better at the end of the year, and I thought he was healthier at the end of the year, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So he may be in good position to have a full spring. A guy like Jordan-Hancock just so desperately needs a healthy spring, I think, to get his feet back under him. Yes, literally he had a leg problem. I'm not trying to make a pun there, but like just to get his foundation set again and be able to build on what he had started last year. That's the place where this group needs to start, because any position group, even if you like what they've got from some younger guys like Jair Brown and the way that he was able to step in last year on very short notice as a true freshman and hold his own, like that tells you that he can help make that room more stable. But I think the best thing for this room is if a guy like him starts to look like a luxury because he's maybe a little bit buried behind guys who are really performing well above him.
I think so. There's typically an order for how we get certain positions on certain days. This is the one position group that I hope we get a lot later in the spring, maybe closer to the spring game, just because I think the most important question with the cornerbacks is just being able to ask players, who's making plays? Who's getting picks? Who's batting the ball down? Who's getting tackles in the open field? And you can't ask that 2 days in the spring practice because you're going to get we're just learning stuff. It's fundamentals. But if they've got 8, 9, 10 practices under their belt, that's probably 4 or 5 practices where they just went live and got competitive. And then if we get to that and it's like we're 2 days before the spring practice and we're getting the cornerbacks and we're asking guys, hey, who's making picks? And somebody goes, Jermaine Matthews has like 7 picks. Jordan-Hancock had like 5 picks in one practice. Nobody can catch a ball on Jair Brown. Even Marvin Harrison is struggling to shake him. That's interesting to me because when we talk about the secondary and the lack of just production there, it didn't feel like the talent was up to par. There weren't guys making Ohio State level, NFL level plays. So if we get halfway through the spring and we're hearing stuff like that, that's when I think you can start to get excited about what this cornerback room might be, regardless of who the names are. I don't care if it's a freshman and a sophomore, or it's denzel-burke and Jordan-Hancock, or it's Davis and Igbinosun. Regardless of who it is, if we get to the end of spring and it feels like there's 2 guys whose names are constantly being churned out by coaches and by players, that's an exciting place for Ohio State to be, because then you can build up the rest of the room throughout the summer and fall camp.
It does feel like, Nathan, that this could be one of those where when we get a little window into something and we see the corners are just running through drills and the first 2 guys in line are Jair Brown and Jermaine Matthews, and we're all going to be freaking out. Right? Like, it's just going to be like, what is the morsel? Like, what does that mean? I can't believe, what? Because I think you make a good point, Stephen, the idea of like, how do you decide who should play? I don't know. Who knocks passes down in practice? Who has tight coverage on Emeka Egbuka on a crossing route? Like, you just have to show it. It's a lot. I do think in the end, a lot of this stuff, especially even when you have guys who play, it's like, let's go 11 on 11 and see what's up. Right? Let's do these one-on-one corner receiver drills and see what's up. You're not going to find out any other way, Nathan, because Tim Walton knows what these guys have put down on film. And it feels like his conclusion after the film is, let's go and see what you got right now. So that makes it interesting and it makes it fun, but we're also going to be scraping for every cornerback morsel we can possibly get.
Well, yeah, and similarly, we'll see how much we can see, but to kind of follow on Steven's thought, I hope we get the receivers early in camp, because that's one where we're not going to learn a lot about the starting group from who we get this spring, because we know who they are very much, most likely, and they can tell us a lot about who's playing well at cornerback.
I agree. Which is why, if Jerry and Mike are listening to this, we're probably going to get the receivers and the cornerbacks on the exact same day in the dead center middle.
Receivers, cornerbacks, offensive line on the last day of spring.
But like we're gonna talk to Julian Fleming or whatever, right? And it's gonna be like, hey, Julian, yeah, you're good, whatever. I mean, I hope you're healthy, like you're a good player. Anyway, how do the corners look? Julian Fleming's gonna be like, okay, I got it. Julian, could you just give us an individual breakdown on every cornerback on the roster? Like we kind of know what your deal is. You're good. You might break out. Like, but tell us about the new guys, because we just don't know. And I wonder, like, I don't think Tim Walton knows. So how can we know when Tim Walton doesn't know? Because I think Tim Walton is probably sitting here saying, okay, well, I guess Denzel-Burke probably is first in line on the first day of spring practice. But then after that, let's go and let's see what happens. It's going to be fun. Okay.